Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Molten Truth podcast. I am your host, Zoe Michaels. And if you've read anything on our website or have caught the first broadcast we put out, you know that the Molten Truth is about people who were going along with their life and then something phenomenal happened, whether it was traumatic or something just life changing. And the imagery I was going for was that you've been through the fire, you had these amazing experiences, and you came out stronger. Maybe took your life in a whole other direction. And so that is who we are. That is the theme of our show. And I have a wonderful guest for you with this episode. Her name is Yvonne, and I'm probably going to butcher Caputo, but I think that's saying it right. And she wrote her first book at the age of 72. And I'm going to let her tell the whole story. I don't want to steal her thunder, but the book she wrote is amazing, and then the follow-up to it. So I'm going to stop talking and let Yvonne do the talking from this point, and I know you'll enjoy her stories.
All right, thank you for that. So the background to all of this is I started writing at the age of like 61. And it was a January night, I remember distinctly. It was 2008. Dad lived in northwestern Pennsylvania. I live in southeastern Pennsylvania, and we were doing our weekly check-in call. Okay. It was a Sunday night. And after we talked about his health and dialysis and hospital visits and those kinds of things, sometimes we stalled for what to talk about because I'm not a sports fan. But on that particular night, he told a funny, quirky, off-the-wall story about making an emergency landing in a B-24 in freed Belgium toward the end of World War II. He never talked about the war. I mean, I knew he was in it. I knew that he flew B-24s. He was a navigator. But for him to open up with a story, I said to him, Dad, let me go get a pencil and paper. I want to take notes. This is my dad. What the hell do you want to do that for? And I said, this is really good. I think that this would be something that the rest of the family would like to know. So the very next week, and I honestly don't know where this came from, when we opened the conversation, I said, if you're willing, Dad, start at the beginning. How did you get into the war? And Zoe, story after story after story, started rolling off his tongue. And I said to myself, I think I've got something here. So I know you can Google everything. So I Googled first-person stories of GIs in World War II. And I didn't find a lot. And Dad's story was so unique that I just knew I had a book. But in the beginning, it really was going to be a book for the family. But the more the stories kind of rolled off his tongue, I thought, I have something that I think I can publish. So that's how that all happened. It took 11 years and it took 4 rewrites. But at the age of 72, I published my first book.
Oh my goodness.
We've lost
myself, and I couldn't get myself unmuted there. But that is amazing. Just that happened, and that opportunity to tell that story and to write your first book at age 61. That's just wow.
Yeah, we women are often very uncomfortable telling our age. But in this case, I couldn't not do it because I thought, publishing something at 72 was pretty special. And
Yes.
the wonderful part about this book, Zoe, is it became the bridge for me to get to know my father in a way that I'd always wanted to know. And it also became the bridge for Dad and I to have the relationship that I'd always wanted to have. He was greatest generation. There was food on the table. He was home every night. He slept right down the hall. He hunted and fished with his sons, but having that kind of close connection, we didn't have it. And once we started working on this book, there was a shift. He began to trust me in a way that he'd never done before. And so the stories became more and more real. I think he became very, very comfortable saying to me when he was over in England on maybe his first or second flight, they're coming back from Germany or France. They experience flak. Now, this is incendiary bombs that are shot up into the air, and when they burst, shrapnel goes everywhere, and they tore planes apart. 10 men in a plane going down. So he watched B-24s going down around him, and he said to me, Yvonne, I was so scared, I peed myself.
Understandably.
And at that time, what your audience needs to know is these weren't pressurized cabins. They were 22,000 feet above the ground, 30 to 40 degrees below zero, in sheepskin clothing and wool, underwear. And his heat suit disconnected. Well, okay, so he's up there. There's no heat in his heat suit. And because he was the navigator, he was able to get on the interphone and say to the pilot, we're approaching the English Channel. Get this plane down to an altitude so I don't freeze to death.
Well, thankfully, he was able to do that.
Yeah. But Dad saying to me he was scared about anything.
Huge.
So I learned about the nightmare that he had. Same nightmare for 3 years after he came home. It was so bad that he literally dug channels in the mattress. And they had to get a new mattress.
Wow.
And I said to him, I'm a psychotherapist. So I said to him, I said, well, Dad, that those nightmares were normal. Mm-hmm. And he said, what the hell are you talking about? So I was able to explain to him how in 1945 and 46 and 47, they didn't know about nightmares. They didn't know about flashbacks. They didn't know how the brain captures images.
The PTSD and all of that.
Yep. And trying to work that through are nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
Now, gratefully for him, after 3 years, they just stopped. So I said to Dad, your nightmares, were normal, given what you witnessed. And you've spent all these years thinking there was something wrong with you because you had them. Right. So that kind of a conversation, to be able to have that with my dad. And I've said frequently, when we were talking that night, I could literally feel his shoulders drop.
Yeah.
That all these years later, he's finding out that it was a normal thing from an abnormal situation, a really abnormal situation.
You can imagine how he must have felt realizing that he was behaving normally. He must have been wondering about that for so long.
Well, he said that when he came back from the war, he would see other GIs on the street. Mm-hmm. And he would know that they had been through similar things that he had been through, whether they were in the infantry or whether they were up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't talk about it. So he thought, here I am carrying this all by myself when these guys seem to be just fine. They may not have been.
Right. They just were wearing really good masks.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think when you and I first spoke, I don't know that I registered that you had become a psychotherapist. I wonder, was maybe the living environment, since you didn't know your dad's full story, but was that somehow an influence in choosing that career path? Maybe on a subconscious level, maybe.
That could very well be.
I mean, it just occurred to me when you said that. I mean, how great that you were able to give him comfort because of that knowledge base.
Well, I do have to say that there are a lot of circumstances in my life where I feel that my choice of careers has definitely directed me. And my brother and I were in the car, and he said to me after he'd read the book, he said, "How'd you get Dad to open up like that?" And I didn't answer him at first because I didn't know. But the more I thought about his question, one of the things that a professor said when I was getting my master's in clinical psych, he said, the hardest job you will have as a therapist is to listen. And I remember sitting in class, not laughing out loud, but I remember thinking to myself, there's nothing hard about listening. You just sit there and you listen.
If only that was if that was true.
Yeah. So being a teacher too, because I started out in teaching and then I went into therapy, and I've had a variety of careers.
Right.
But teaching and therapy taught me how to listen. Therapy taught me how to ask open-ended questions. Therapy taught me how to hear a little bit of a nugget and want more, knowing that there was something underneath all of that. So I truly believe that there's something in what you said, that my choice of careers. The other piece, Zoe, is I learned why my dad was my dad.
And that's the most beautiful gift. I remember thinking when you first started describing, I'm all about music. So my mind went to Reba McEntire's song about the greatest man I never knew. And if your dad had not spoken up and started sharing his story, that could have been your song.
My father was so quick to anger. Now, never struck me. Never. Okay. But there was this flash of temper, and I will admit I was afraid of him. But in the way that he answered the questions, and we went from the war all the way through his life. The book has his life's story up until his death. But all the way through, there were things that happened to Dad that he couldn't explain. Yeah. So he would flash. He would just flash with this temper. And I finally understood it. And so on my part, there was just gratitude that he could be the man he was, given the kinds of things that he could go through.
Absolutely.
One of the stories about my dad, he was a brittle diabetic. And when I drove back, I always drove back on a Friday because I could pick him up from his dialysis treatment and we could go out to dinner. And I walked in and he was seated with his physician. And the physician was going over blood reports and that kind of thing and how dialysis was going. And he ended by saying to my dad, "Mike, you cannot drive anymore.
Mm.
And my father got so angry. What do you mean? I'm better driving out there than those potheads done it. I mean, he went on and on and on.
Yeah.
And Dr. Zellen said to him, but Mike, sometimes after dialysis, you pass out.
Oh.
You can't drive anymore. And if I find out that you're driving, I'll call the state and have them take your license away. So my dad said, okay, I won't drive. All right. So here I am. It's Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
We go from Friday to Sunday. And I took and went for a ride on a trail in my hometown. And all the way I'm stewing. Do I take the keys away? Do I bring it up with him? I don't want him to yell at me. He's not going to like this. Is he going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
So I get home. And he does what he normally did when I visit. He kind of ordered me to make breakfast.
Love that.
Yeah. So I'm making his breakfast, and he has this chair that's on wheels, and it helps it roll around the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And he's on the chair, and his head's down, and he's beginning this, I don't know why I can't drive. I'm better than those potheads. Going on.
Yeah.
And then he said, but I gave my word.
Ah, I love that.
And Zoe, I knew I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to take the keys. I didn't have to bring it up to him, because my father was such a man of integrity that if he gave his word that he wasn't going to drive, he didn't.
That is such a beautiful thing to be able to say about anyone, and especially a father. That is, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So doing the book was definitely that connection. In 2009, at Christmas time, we went home to visit him.
Yeah.
And he was in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So it gave my husband and I a perfect time to make sure the house was cleaned and groceries were stocked and he had everything he needed. And I went back to see him right before we were to leave. Mm-hmm. And I handed him his Christmas present, which was the first draft of the book.
Oh, I bet he loved that.
So he's holding it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're saying goodbye. And I just turned before I walked out the door and said, I want you to know how proud I am of you. What for? I said, for your service. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, honey, I'm proud of you. You wrote the book.
I mean, what a gift for him to be able to share his stories, first of all, with you, to be closer to you as a daughter, but then to have you turn around and make those stories available to other people.
Well, Dad was really charismatic. He loved a good joke. He loved telling a good joke. He loved telling the story. So I think I've come by it honestly. So for me to have told his story, mm-hmm. What he said to me was, I'm going to be remembered.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've done something that my daughter thinks is pretty cool, and I'm going to be remembered. So that was for him to say to me, I'm so proud of you, you wrote the book. It was another one of those kind of linchpins in how far my dad and I had come in terms of a relationship. Even to the point, Zoe, of talking about death and dying.
Yeah. And I know you're going to be leading into the next book in a second, but before we get there.
Okay.
So in recent months, I came across something that's helped me personally, based on a comment a friend of mine made. It was the terminology affected labeling. So I'm wondering, based on the fact that affected labeling is scientifically proven that someone sharing their experiences, talking about them, actually helps reduce the emotional state. So I wonder if him opening up and sharing that with you, if you saw any visible evidence of that helping him also, maybe in the way he interacted with the family, or just in him making him more comfortable with himself even.
It did. It did. It's like, well, okay. Why psychotherapy works is because people get to tell their stories.
Yeah.
And they get to tell their story to somebody who will honor whatever it is that they went through.
Mm-hmm.
And in voicing the story, that's a part of the healing process.
Yes.
And so with Dad, his being able to tell me, you know, all of these little intricacies in his life, I think gave him, well, I know it did. It gave him a peace.
Yes.
It gave him a peace. So yes.
Absolutely. So I just find that so fascinating. Like I said, that was something I just learned a few months ago, but it makes so much sense. And then here's like this further validates it in addition to my own experiences in my life. So I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you continue on with your second book. So we talked about the Flying with Dad, and now we're going to lead into
Dying with Dad.
Okay.
And Dying with Dad is not a sad book. Backtrack a little. When my third career was, I was the vice president of human resources in a retirement community. Okay. And I was on the ethics committee, and we had a case where someone who was in last stages of dementia needed treatment. Mm-hmm. She had an advance directive, but it was from another state. Mm-hmm. So her daughter couldn't deny her the treatment that was recommended. Okay. Mm-hmm. It actually went to court, and the court gave a surrogate so that the mother could be treated. But should the treatment not work, then the daughter could step in and honor her mother's wishes. Oh. I heard this, and I went to heck in a handbasket. So I called Dad, and I said, do you have an advance directive? What's that? And then I told him what it was. I said, if I find an attorney and I come back home, will you go? He said, sure. So here he and I are sitting across from the attorney, and she's saying, what kind of treatment do you want? Who's going to be your healthcare agent? Do you want to be resuscitated? And it's more inclusive than those questions.
Right.
So we did that. And then along came my discovery of a document called The 5 Wishes. And this is an advance directive on heart. So not only do you choose your healthcare agent, you also do all the things about what you want and you don't want physically. Mm-hmm. But it has questions like, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your children to know? What kind of a funeral do you want? Mm-hmm. How do you want people to be with you if you're non-communicative? You know, all of these really important questions. So on another trip back home, I take the document with me. 6.5 hours of how do I introduce it to him? Is he going to yell at me? What's this going to be like? I walked into his room and it felt right. Mm-hmm. It just felt right. So I said, Dad, I've got another document I want to do with you. And he said, okay. So he lifted his legs and put it over the side of the bed, patted for me to come sit next to him. It was warm. It was warm where I was sitting. And we pull up the hospital bench and we go question after question after question. Mm. One of them was, do you want to give your organs after you're dead? And Dad said, hell no. He said, who in the world would want them? They're 87 years old. They're not any good, So we crossed that one out.
Yeah.
So when that document was finished, I could rest easy that if it worked out, I would be able to support my father's passing away in a way that he wanted.
Absolutely. And that's so important to honor their wishes instead of what our wishes are. So that's beautiful you thought of that.
Well, I had a friend called me who did the 5 wishes, and she said, well, I don't know about this one because I don't know what my family wants. I don't know about this one because I don't know what my family wants. Mm-hmm. I said, this is yours. This is what you want.
Yes.
So when you're doing the document, choose the things that you want.
Absolutely.
So on that last visit, mm-hmm. I got home that night. This is 2009. Phone rings and it's my father, and he's livid. I mean, I'm holding the phone here, and he's screaming at me, Yvonne, why did you tell them that I could go home? So he goes on and on and on about how much pain he's in. And so finally, when he settled down, I said, Dad, what I told them was that you could go home when you were ready. And it doesn't sound like you're ready.
Yeah.
And then he said, Hon, I'm scared. Can you come home? I said, I will be there tomorrow. I'll leave tomorrow morning and I'll come back. And then he did something he'd never done before. He said, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I didn't mean it. And I said, you were just venting. Yeah. Dad's wish was to go feet first out of his own home.
Yes.
That's what happened when I got home. Because I was his healthcare agent, the neighbor who was taking care of him, we found Dad on the floor in the bedroom, and he wasn't responsive. Mm-hmm. So we did call emergency. We were able to get him out at the foot of the bed. And I showed the 5 wishes to the EMTs, and they said, we can't use these. They're too old. I don't think that that's true. So knowing that there was a do not resuscitate on Dad's hospital orders, I called. And I said, they're going to bring Dad in. Please make sure the DNR is at the emergency room. Grace, the ER doctor, called and said, you can stop working on him.
To the EMTs. He told the
EMTs. Good. So I laid down beside him, put my arm over his chest, told him that I loved him, told him that he was going to be with Mom, which is where he wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And then I did what was the glue in our family, the Lord's Prayer.
Sure.
And he was gone.
Just that quick.
Just that quick. So the EMTs are taking him out feet first on the gurney. Okay. This is northwestern Pennsylvania. The snow's coming down an inch an hour. Mm. They place Dad's body on the driveway, and the ambulance doors are open and the lights showing on his face. Mm-hmm. And there's this soft, sweet smile. And I went, yes!
Because he was at peace.
He was at peace. He went the way he wanted to go. Yeah. And the EMTs looked at me like I'd lost, any marble that I might have had. And I said, he had his wish. You gave him his wish. He died in his own home. Mm-hmm. So dying with Dad is my journey of starting in childhood, mm-hmm. learning to be comfortable talking about death and dying, and having these conversations. I'd call Dad, and we'd do our little bit, and he would say, oh, Yvonne, I want to go. And I'd say, tell me, Dad. And he'd go through the litany of all the things that were wrong, just where older people get. Yeah. They just get to where they're ready. Mm-hmm. And then Sometimes when I called, I would say, well, you still want to be around or do you want to go? He said, nah, it's been pretty good the last week or so. So I'll stick around for a while. So we would just do this.
Yeah.
It just became a part of the conversation. It wasn't the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
It was something that we talked about. And I didn't get to do that with my mother. She died alone in a hospital. I didn't get to do it with my brother, who was killed in an automobile accident. So my grief experience with Mom and with Mark is vastly different.
Traumatic, I would imagine.
Yeah. With Dad, do I miss him? Yeah.
Of course. Of course.
Am I a blubbering mess at times thinking of him? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Would I look like to cook him one more pot roast dinner? Sure.
Guaranteed.
Yeah. Guaranteed. But equal to the incredible sorrow is a sacred joy. Now, that's what I want people to experience. If you're going to have to go through grief, which we all have to do, it can be so much easier if beside the sorrow, there is this joy. And the piece that I just now had an aha was at that point, I knew my dad. I could let go.
Yes.
Because we had come to this place. Mm-hmm. And for him to trust me in that most of sacred ways, to watch out for him when he passed, there isn't anything better than that.
Absolutely. Well, and just like he was a man of integrity when he promised his doctor not to drive, you were a woman of integrity, letting him die on his own terms, feet first, as you promised to let him do.
People ask me how I did it. And I was on automatic pilot. Yeah. I really was. I mean, the EMT said, this doesn't look good. I call the hospital. They get the DNR to the doc, and the doc calls. I never questioned it. Dad wanted to go feet first out of his own home. Right. So I just wanted to make sure that that's what happened. So dying with Dad is definitely to encourage people to have those conversations.
Absolutely. Well, by having those conversations, they know their wishes. It's not a matter of trying to think in the moment, what would they want? Guesswork, because that makes it so much more difficult when you're trying to guess instead of knowing and having the reassurance that you absolutely know what they would want.
We were in the priest's office. Dad was a Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. Okay. And my brother and sister were sitting around talking to Father. And my brother said, well, gee, I don't really know how this works, Father. I'm not sure about Dad. Yeah. And I said, well, he wants a high mass. He wants all the smells and bells. He wants us to choose, the people who carry the casket. I can't think of the word.
Pallbearers.
Pallbearers, thank you. Yeah. He wants us to read, if we'd like to read, either his grandchildren or his children. Mm-hmm. He said, let them choose. Yeah. Let them choose what readings. He said, that doesn't matter to me. And he said, Kirk will sing. Kirk is my husband, who has a glorious tenor voice.
Lovely.
And he said to me earlier, and you will sing too.
Oh.
He wanted Amazing Grace, the Lord's Prayer, and the Ave Maria.
Sure.
It was all done. He had the funeral that he wanted because he had told me what it was that he wanted.
Absolutely. Which was such a kindness of him to, first of all, cooperate with you in the planning early on and expressing his wishes. Because when you are grieving the loss of someone, trying to, again, plan and figure out on top of that grief, it just adds so much more stress. Mm-hmm. It's bad enough to lose someone you love, but then to have that on top of everything. So what a kindness he did for you and your family, as well as what you did for him.
I had beta readers for both books. And my question to the beta readers were, they had read my first book. What was it about Dad's passing? And 3 instances who had then read Dying with Dad. One was a young woman, and she said, my parents have tried to bring this up time and time again, and I've always pushed them away. We don't need to talk about this. It's too soon, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When she read Dying with Dad, she said, I went to them and said, you've wanted to talk about this. Let's do it. The third person was someone who was in his 80s, and he didn't know that he should do anything at all. So he got the 5 wishes. And he said to his daughters on his 87th birthday, I believe, this is what I want for my birthday. I want you guys to zoom in, and I want to go over the 5 wishes with you. That's my birthday present. So they're going along and talking about everything. And he said, I want to be cremated. And one of the daughters said to him, well, gee, Dad, what do you want us to do with your ashes? He said, I don't care. Throw them over a bridge. At that point, what.
Right.
And I heard from this woman, because she said her father never liked to trouble anybody. He wanted it to be easy.
Yeah.
So they said, well, gee, Dad, wouldn't you like them to be distributed at your birthplace on the prairie in Canada?
Yeah.
He said, oh, that's too much trouble. Well, Dad, what if we'd like to do that for you? He said, you would really? They said, yes. He changed that part of his 5 wishes. The third one that was most impactful to me was one of the women in my writers group, acutely ill for 10 years. And when she read Dying with Dad, she got the 5 wishes and did it. Yeah. And she had decided that she wanted hospice. And so our publisher let us know. And the woman's husband gave us opportunities to talk to her for about 15 minutes on a Zoom call, of all things. Yeah. When she and I talked, she just went over and over how grateful she was for the 5 wishes. She and her family had talked it through. They were okay that she was choosing hospice, and she was a younger woman. So to be thanked, for having now some insight in what to do, it just made it so much easier for both she and her children and her husband.
It really does make a difference. Today, as a matter of fact, the timing of this is just like, wow, because this was not on my radar today, as you know. But my niece just lost her mother-in-law this morning. We learned just a couple of weeks ago that she was at the end of her life. She had, I think it was some very aggressive form of cancer that had just recently been diagnosed. And it went very quickly, so quickly that we were really stunned that happened today. And while I'm sure they spent the last week or so talking about arrangements because they were forced with that reality, how much better it would have been if there could have been much further in advance conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any advice as we get ready to wrap up? Like, what would you most want people to know, or what advice would you most like to give? Obviously, the 5 wishes, I'm sure, would be part of that conversation.
All right. So if a parent or a loved one comes to you and says, I know at some point I'm going to die and this is what I want to do, sit down and listen. Make the time to talk about it. Yes, it's going to be hard, as many things in life are. And for those of us, my 5 wishes are done. My advance directive is done. My children and I have talked about it openly. They know what I want, and they're wonderful in that sense because they've been so open to doing it. So be able to listen. Now, the organization, fivewishes.org, even they have, this is $5, by the way, for the document. But you can do it online and they'll save it for a year and a half. But they also have booklets and things that help you to think about how to get into the discussion.
That's good. Yeah, because it could be awkward without some kind of guidance.
Yeah, there is guidance. And then the other thing is the value of when parents or anyone starts telling a story.
Yes.
Sit back and listen and ask open-ended questions. I did a book club with Flying with Dad, and there were 3 young women in the audience who hadn't said anything. I'm a former teacher, so they're not going to get away with that. So the first 2, one was really interested in World War II, so she loved the book in that way.
Yeah.
The second one said, I've got a really good relationship with my dad, and I'm so grateful, having read your book, that I have that. And then the third one said, I don't have a good relationship with my father, but reading your book, I want that. And so now Dad and I are spending time together. So, and I have to say, as a therapist, Zoe, there are some parent-child relationships that cannot be repaired. They're toxic. So this is not advice for somebody who's in a toxic relationship that they need to get out of that relationship altogether.
Right.
But where there is a possibility of getting closer, the ability to really listen is the key.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And I appreciate that balanced viewpoint of don't damage yourself with a toxic relationship, but where there's potential for a healthy relationship, of course. I love that you took that both sides of that equation. So last question before we wrap up, without giving away the farm. Are there any books on the horizon at all, or are you done writing?
I'm working on a third.
All right. Something to look forward to.
It's because of your topic, your theme, I just find great joy in writing. It's hard sometimes. It's hard sometimes for me to stick to it. Yes, I have writer's block. Yes, it takes me a long time to get done, but it's provided me with the opportunity in retirement to continue to grow and expand.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're anything like me, and I don't know that you are, but for me, when I write things down, I think I understand them better. It helps me process my own thoughts and emotions. So for me, writing is truly how I connect with myself and with others.
And that's very true in the therapeutic process. With folks that I've worked with, there are activities that I give them all the time to write. And that's very true. When they're looking at what they've written, they can go, yuck. Or, right. Oh, so that's where that comes. Oh, so that's what that means. It's there in black and white.
Yeah.
So the writing part, you're right. Very right. It's a wonderful process to get to know yourself a little better.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. It's one of those things that, I always have written. My whole life I've written, but I never stepped out of the shadows as a writer, publishing anything until late in life like you. I mean, just at the age of 51 is when I started publishing work. Even though I've always written, I told my stepson that I published something. He's like, "You write?" I'm like, I've always written. You just didn't know it.
Uh-huh.
But I wonder how many other people out there that maybe have stories to tell and they've just been shy and just holding it in the way that I did and perhaps you did.
Yes. Yeah, if I would encourage anyone, and it took me 11 years.
Yeah.
And the other piece of this, because you mentioned it, is I got professional help. I had somebody edit and the first draft, and I said, "What do you think's wrong with it? What do I need to improve?" And she said, "You need to connect your paragraphs. You need to open with the thought. You need to follow through." So I went back and rewrote it.
Yeah.
And then I contacted another professional, and he said to me, "Well, you're not in it." I said, "Well, it's not about me. It's about my dad." "Well, you need to be in it." And then he said, "Read Tuesdays with Maury." And that is definitely a book where a writer talks about himself and the visits that he has with Maury. So then I went back and I rewrote it. And then when I chose a publisher, I interviewed 4 different people, and I chose the person who I felt really connected with me and listened. Mm-hmm. She took my 3rd draft, threw it in a blender, and threw it back at me and said, "This is what I think you should do with it." The thing is, Zoe, that her idea was so good, I couldn't help but see the value of what she suggested. Mm-hmm. So Dying with Dad starts out with what we were like as a family. That's section 1. Mm-hmm. Section 2 is Dad's story in his words, in his voice. Mm-hmm. And I was able to do that because I have all the letters that he wrote to my mother during the war.
That's the best part. All that rich canvas to work with.
You bet. And then section 3 is how the writing of the book gave me the father that I always wanted. Yeah. And he got a daughter that he didn't know he had.
Yeah. Now, how did your siblings, I meant this was the best question, but it's just too good to pass up because I know we talked about, I think there was 4 of you all together.
Yes.
So how did your siblings feel about this relationship that you suddenly had with your dad that wasn't there before?
We always worked as a team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we always worked as a team when it came to our parents. Mm-hmm. So my sister was just so pleased that Dad didn't die alone. Mm-hmm. And so many, actually, she gave me some of the stories that are in the book. Mm-hmm. And my brother was also glad that I had been able to connect to Dad in this way. So that was really, it was a part of, I think, how we were as a team.
That's the nicest thing. Like you, I come from a large family. There's a total of 5 of us. I have 4 siblings in addition to myself. And while we all come together when we need to, we're very good that way. 3 of us are especially close, no matter what. And it makes such a difference after my dad passed away that the 3 of us really could come together routinely on behalf of my mother. Mm-hmm. And we're still there for each other. We talk almost daily, and thank goodness for it. I'm so glad to have them. Yeah. Although I admit freely that as the middle child, I long to be an only child much of my childhood life. Now I'm super grateful for them.
And in my case, I went to my mother. There's 4 years difference between myself and my sister. Mm-hmm. And then my baby brother was 5. So I said to Mom, I don't understand it. You were so strict with Mickey and I, Michael, my brother Michael, and you just let Connie and Mark just do anything they want to do. And she said, Yvonne, by the time they came around, I was tired.
Yep. That's about how it is. Our baby brother, same thing. He got away with murder, but it's because our parents were worn out.
Yep. Yep.
Well, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. I can't wait to maybe bring you back when you do put that third book out, whenever that comes. And I'm guessing, is Amazon the only place where your books are available, or are they available elsewhere?
Thank you for asking. Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If your audience really likes independent bookstores and their treasures, just go to your independent bookstore and ask for them to order it.
Okay.
And you can do it that way. So there are, through independent and through Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Perfect. Well, I am sure you're going to have a lot of people going, where are these two books? Where can I get them? And I would imagine you're going to see a bump from people having watched this interview. So
thank you for that.
Well, it just seems logical. Well, again, it's been a pleasure, and I wish you a very good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thanks.